class in America, the working people, need to be represented, and that the taxes are too high, and we need to relieve people who aren't making that much income.
Good response. Good response. What do you hope to change or better as a member of the Congress?
I hope to lower taxes and make it so everyone has a fair and equal opportunity in the United States.
Awesome. So would you say your number one priority if you were elected would be to lower taxes, or what is it?
I'd say so, probably. Lower taxes and kind of just overall look at what the government is spending our money on and try to eliminate the things that the government is spending our money on so that they don't even need to take that much taxes.
Okay. Awesome. So, what do you think is the most challenging aspect of this position, and what will you do to overcome that?
Well, I think the most challenging part would probably be the bureaucracy behind it and trying to get my ideas implemented. There's a lot of people that might not want it, whatever that might be. The government's uselessly spending money for them, but we don't need it. We'll just be trying to get through that.
Awesome. So, a little bit of a transition here to current topics. What would your response be to handling the current coronavirus?
As it stands, well, they just announced that there was a vaccine, so I think as long as we can distribute that nationwide to the people that really need it and just wipe out the remaining pockets in larger cities, then I think the country's right back on track.
Do you have anything how do you think people should handle it at home? Like, should they still be going about their normal lives, or should they be quarantining, or what?
I feel like everyone's normal life has kind of changed, so I feel like most people are still at home in some regards. I would say go out to get your groceries, do whatever, but don't unnecessarily do anything that would put you in very close proximity. Going to the movies, everyone has the internet now.
Right. So, sorry to cut you off, but how do you think schooling should continue for the rest of the year?
I'd say that depends on state to state, city to city, but if everyone that has to go to school has to be vaccinated for like polio and stuff. So maybe those who want to go back in person need to be vaccinated.
Okay.
Or maybe if the numbers are just low enough, then there isn't a need for that. But
so you don't think we should go back to school before there is a vaccine?
Not necessarily. Depending on the city, if their numbers are already low enough and there's not that much of a risk anymore, then they can go ahead and go through with it. But obviously, it would help that.
Good response. Another little bit of a change of topic, but what is your stance on abortion? Do you tend to side more pro-choice or pro-life? And do you think there should be fewer laws restricting it?
I'm of the very libertarian of I don't care. But what I do care about is government spending. And the thing with it is, as it stands, everyone knows Planned Parenthood. It is very heavily government subsidized. They provide one service, which is abortion, but they break it into 3 categories, which is checkup and the actual abortion and the after part. so they get 3 times the government benefits. But as long as we can narrow it down to what they actually need, get everyone the service that they're providing that wants it, and stop giving them bonuses for how many people get this service. They just run as a business. They don't need, if there's actually a market for it, then they don't need the government to step in. And I don't think we should be subsidizing stuff like that not everyone uses, not everyone agrees to it.
Okay, so you think you agree with pro-choice, but you think it should not be funded by the government.
Yes.
Okay, I see. So, Gavin, there have been calls from both sides of the aisle recently to designate groups such as Antifa as hate groups. Where do you stand on these calls?
Well, I believe as it stands, Antifa and other such groups are already classified as domestic terrorism. So there would be the only option of repealing that. And as we've seen, I kind of would agree with how it is already classified. If there are already other groups that are on the same side, I would say, but are not with the express purpose of demolishing. And yeah.
All right. As you may have seen in recent news, Oregon has decided to decriminalize possession of small amounts of pretty extreme drugs, such as crack cocaine and methamphetamine. Do you ever, or what is your stance on this, and do you ever see that coming to Virginia?
I would hope I don't see it come to Virginia, and if it's the way I'm thinking of, because there are certain scientific benefits to legalizing small amounts, like testing. We've all heard about the give mice a little LSD or something, but those tests usually have to go to another country where it is legal or not expressly outlawed. So in the U.S., if that's legalized for scientific research and not medical use or whatever they would claim, then maybe I would agree with it. And I would not harshly punish, I guess, those with small amounts, but it would still be some kind of punishment.
I think if I read correctly, I believe that Oregon decriminalized it to keep people with minor drug offenses out of jail. Do you still think that's a valid reason to decriminalize these drugs?
Yes, I do. I don't believe in any case that having a small amount of a substance is, you don't deserve to go to prison for such crime. I do think if you have that, it's probably connected with a larger problem. If you're not the one selling it, then you probably have a problem with using it. And that might be something that you would need to go to a kind of counseling or rehabilitation for that. But it wouldn't be a punishment, I wouldn't say.
So your big thing is lowering taxes and making sure that the government spends money on stuff we actually need. Do you think those rehabilitation centers would be something that the government would spend money on? Do you think that's a valid thing to spend money on?
Yes. If you look at our prison population as it stands now, we have many, many people that are already incarcerated for small crimes like I just described. And that costs the government a lot of money and makes the government look very bad because no one wants that. So I think if we created a lot of jobs and rehabilitation centers, got people trained in that sort of thing. Then there are also medical facilities, so a lot of nurses and places like that. I think that makes the government look a lot better and is a very beneficial use of our money. It also takes money away from that. So it's not just a whole new thing we're sprouting up. We're taking money out of something else, putting it there.
That's a great point. So, again, on your stance on spending government money wisely, what are your stances? Like, do you support the calls to defund the police and reinvest that money in other forms of public safety?
Not necessarily, no. I think the main thing that people are outraged about is what the police have. What has government grants given them that has basically made them a militia? And that's the problem. The government has given them money, and they've spent it to arm themselves because that's what the government told them to do with that money. So I think if we can take that away and still support and give the police resources that they need while not overfunding and giving them tanks and stuff. But I do think other kinds of public safety and services are, required. And they may not get as much money, but taking that away from the police, like I said before, we take all that money for equipment and weapons that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. We reinvest that into our public safety and services.
Interesting. Kind of on a similar topic of you saying, like, all this money on weapons and all these heavy artillery and everything. What is your stance on the Second Amendment? Would you like to put restrictions on the Second Amendment or keep it the way it is, or what?
Of course not. The police in itself is a branch of government. They get government money. The whole point of the Second Amendment is to protect against the government. And when the government and police have tanks as it is now, what do people have? Exactly. There's a lot of restrictions as we have it, and I don't think there needs to be any more. In fact, some might as well be repealed. But I believe the Second Amendment is a very strong thing that us as United States citizens have to protect against not only our own government, but those of the others.
Interesting. Very interesting. That's all we have time for today, Gavin. Thank you so much for answering these questions. It was really great to hear your point of view and all these stances, and I feel like we got a really good look at what your priorities are as you run for Congress. Make sure to follow us on social media, and good night, America.